I know the first session was really amazing. It's time that we go ahead in future and safety. So for this session, I would like to call upon stage our speakers for the day. Calling up on stage at first, Sven Bolschmidt. Can we have a round of applause for Mr. Sven Bolschmidt? He's the Executive Director of International Organization of Flavour Industry. Before joining the International Organization of Flavour Industry, he was the Executive Director for the German Flavour Association and German Fragrance Association. Ladies and gentlemen, I would now like to call upon stage Mr. A. Apparao. Mr. A. Apparao, an Osmania University graduate with 26 years of experience in the flavour industry. Apparao is the Managing Director of CEC Flavors and Fragrances Private Limited. He had served in the Indian Navy for 15 years before joining the organization. He has represented the industry with address to the FSSAI Scientific Panel on Flavor Regulations. Can we have a round of applause for Mr. A. Apparao? Mr. A. Apparao is the speaker and the moderator for today's session. And now I would like to call upon stage Dr. Debabrata Kanungo. Dr. Debabrata Kanungo is the chairman of the Scientific Panel on Food Additives, member of Scientific Committee under Food Safety and Standards Authority of India, and the former Additional Director General in the Ministry of Health and Family Welfare Government of India. A Doctor of Medicine in Pharmacology, he is associated with WHO Core Assessment Group as an expert for more than 3 decades in preparation of EHC and CICARD as pesticides and chemicals. He is also a WHO expert member with WHO/FAO JMPR and an impaneled expert member for WHO/FAO SECFA. Can we have a big round of applause for Dr. Debabrata Kanungo? It's time that we start off with our next session, the future in food and safety. A very insightful and interesting session. 3 wonderful speakers, 1 amazing moderator. Handing over the stage and mic to Mr. A. Apparao.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I think the entire flower industry is waiting for this session. Yeah, I'll just give you the perspective of flower industry first, and then we'll go to Dr. Kanungo. I know everybody is waiting for Dr. Kanungo's speech. The Indian flower industry, the Indian compounded flower industry is estimated to be about rupees 6,000 crore, which is less than 0.1% of the total food chain. This is estimated to be growing at 12 to 15%. Apart from the multinational companies, there are about 120 to 150 organized, tiny, small and medium scale industries manufacturing flavors. And there are many unorganized units which I am told may go up to 800 and more. Unlike the multinationals, Indian flavor companies are mainly blenders. Almost 70% of raw materials are imported. Very few flavoring substances are made in India. Compounded flavoring exports are estimated to grow to is estimated at rupees 500 crore. The flavor industry is expected to grow strong at about 15 to 20% across all segments, and export may double. To take advantage of this growth, the Indian flavor industry has to focus on science, technology and safety, to invest in R&D and improve production processes, harmonize with global regulatory framework to facilitate trade, adopt and adapt to scientific principles and methods to understand flavor characteristics and behavior, need to create innovative high quality flavors, ensure strict quality control measures for safe flavors, adhere to GMP in flavorings. To be more competitive, we need to develop high quality flavoring ingredients indigenously less dependence on imports, adhere to import country regulatory requirements so that we can export safe flavors and ensure our Indian clients are able to export their products. Overall, the focus should be on providing safe, high quality and innovative flavors while maintaining ethical and responsible business practices. Indian flavor regulations and concerns of the industry. Flavors are in 3.3.1 of FSSAI Food Additives Regulation 2011. Currently, we have a negative list of flavoring substances. World over, countries are adopting by reference. It is critical to overcome concerns about moving away from the negative list approach. During licensing process, FSSAI FOSCOs insists that all flavor raw materials and formulations to be uploaded. This leads to disclosure of formulations, which is very critical for the flavor industry. External lab testing of flavors every 6 months is prohibitively costly, as formulations may go into thousands. There are interpretation gaps at enforcement levels, and they are causing difficulties. There is an example, small example, I would like to quote because we had recently been booked for not mentioning nutritional information on the labeling. The bottle has been picked up in a Gujarat state, which is dated 2021. The new guidelines, by then the new notification has been already given that flavorings need not be mentioned nutritional information. But still, even the old regulation, there is an interpretation gap there. All non-nutritive food items or food additives need not declare nutritional information. But still, our sample has been picked up, and the local authority has rightly classified it in 3.3.1, but they said that since the nutrition information is not there, it is a misbranded. We have challenged it, and it has gone to the Central Institute in Pune. There, to my surprise, they have classified it as proprietary food and said since it's a proprietary food, it needs to be, nutrition information has to be declared. Then we went to the collector to adjudication, and we are penalized 45,000 rupees. This is a small example of the interpretation of the gaps. FSSAI audits are insisting for registration of all suppliers of raw materials. This is also one of the concerns many of us have. There are few dual-use raw materials which are mainly used for fragrances, but they have a FEMA number, they are also their EFSA, everything. But their usage levels are very low in the flavor industry. People are importing without FSSAI license, but I cannot buy it, and my quantity is so low, we can't do anything about it. So these are the few concerns what we have. The future of food and flavor safety in India is likely to be shaped by continued efforts to improve the food regulations, food safety management practices, and to promote greater awareness among consumers, food producers, food regulators, and the food industry as a whole. Thank you. I request Dr. Kunungo to please come.
Namaste. In the beginning, I am grateful to the organizers to give me a chance to be in front of you. Few days back, somebody asked, of course, he is not a manufacturer, he is a consumer, I can say, do these flavors are being regulated? He all asked, is there any regulation? Then he also asked, do we really need regulation for flavoring substances? What regulation lays down? If you have a regulation, it will lay down rules on flavoring and food ingredients with flavoring properties for use in and on food, for ensuring effective functioning of the internet market, ensuring a high level of protection of human health. This is more important as a medical doctor, I am more concerned about the human health. A high level of consumer protection, including the protection of consumer interest. Last but not the least is the fair practices in food trade. Safety of flavors is always at the back of the mind of the consumer. Consumer keep thinking, does anybody care about or to do any evaluation on this, or are simply ignored saying that all flavors are safe, as they form a very minute quantity as compared to the major ingredients. Flavoring substances sometimes raises the safety concern. I will give you one example. This is one chemical 3-acetyl 2,5-dimethyl-thiophenin. It is a flavoring substances. It was being used as a flavoring to give food a burnt, nutty flavor. Can also occur naturally in boiled and cooked meat. But it was found to be genotoxic, that means can damage DNA. And genotoxic substances, as you know, the genotoxic substances can cause cancer. Those should not be intentionally added to the food. Then, having said so, if we are concerned that we have to regulate them, we need to have whether these are safe or not. How do we do that? How do we undertake the evaluation of a food flavoring? It is a read across. First one is a read across. We have to find out, technological problem. So the read across we have to say, because there are more than 4,000 or 3,000 odd flavors and it is keep on growing. We could probably read across and put them in different groups. We can use the OECD QSR toolbox. It is a standard tool which is doing this allocation of the grammar class. When we talk of the safety of the flavors, to me, the first and foremost is the exposure. Because any toxicity, if there is no exposure is zero, whatever it toxic may be, there won't be any hazard. So we have to see whether the exposure is there or not, how much is the exposure. The safety evaluation of substances intentionally added to food is based on the food consumption data. Whatever we are using, suppose you are adding some flavor and it is used by only one person, so there is no problem for the society. So the exposure data is required in different groups. For the infants from 16 weeks of age, for the toddlers 1 to 2 years, children 3 to 9 years, adolescent 10 to 17 years, adults and elderly. Because the biological effect or the chemical effect of the flavors may differ as per the age, and exposure also is different. If, which is not the case, if at all any flavor you want to add to infant formula, then the exposure to less than 16 weeks of age need to be considered. The exposure assessment, there could be a dietary exposure assessment, there could be an acute exposure assessment within 24 hours, how much it is being exposed, and exposure assessment of food flavoring coming from other sources. Who does this? This is the applicants who comes for the registration or approval to the regulatory authorities, they have to do it and should provide the dietary exposure estimates of a food flavoring by means of a template called food additive intake model, which is devised by FAFAI. But I will not say that we will adopt this particular model blindly in our country. We should modify those models, taking clue from them some India-centric exposure data. Applicants should perform the separate calculation with maximum and if available with the typical use level, because suppose some exposure it is being for 200 ml, but sometimes somebody will take 1 liter. So how much is the maximum exposure also we may have to calculate. This is in March 22, this food additive intake model template has been published. It is version 2.1. Everybody could look into it and give a thought how we can change it or modify it mutatis mutandis to the Indian scenario. Then this, how we will do the exposure assessment? There are two methods, that SPET, that is single portion exposure technique, and another is maximized survey derived intake MSDI, which is annual production in kg multiplied by 10 to the power 9 microgram per kg divided by the number of consumers and the survey response rate. This is very important. Survey response rate has to be done by the manufacturer. When you want to establish one business, at least you do some pre-market survey. How much is my consumer? So this multiplied by 365 days, it will give you some exposure. A scientific guidance on the data requirement for the risk assessment of flavoring to be used on food was published by FAFAI as late as December 22. Probably we could go through it and we can again give a thought to mutatis mutandis to Indian situation. The procedure or whatever it may be, we have to look into the exposure. Having known how much is the exposure, then we can go step by step. The first step is whether there is a, when you go for the QSAR, OECD QSR, you will find out whether it is genotoxic or not. If it is genotoxic, forget about it. If it is not genotoxic, then go to the structural class, whether it is Kramer class 1, Kramer class 2 or Kramer class 3. And for each class, the exposure limit is different. Like Kramer class, one can go up to 1800 microgram per person per day. In Kramer 2, 540 microgram, and Kramer 3, 90 microgram. So if that is within that Kramer class, which will cover about 80 to 90% of the flavors, you need not do anything, you give just approval. If it is not, then you go to other steps, I will come later on. This is a tier system which has been given by FAFAI. Again, we have to consider whether we will go by the tier system or classification system. Here in the tier 1, same thing I have told. This yellow box which you are seeing, that is the exposure assessment. That is the important one. Without that exposure assessment, we cannot do any safety evaluation. I have already told you, if it is genotoxic, forget about it. If it is not genotoxic, go to exposure assessment, find out whether it is below Kramer class or TTC, then you can accept it. If it is above, then what you do, you go to, the logic is when exposure to a substance is below TTC of its corresponding structural class, whether Kramer 1, Kramer 2 or Kramer 3, it can be assumed that the toxicity of the substance is sufficiently captured. Then go to 2 when it exceeds the Kramer class. What you do? You do the first the ADME study, absorption, distribution, metabolism and excretion. Your flavor is to be smelled and to be felt on the tongue. It may be observed, may not be observed. Suppose it is not observed, then getting through your alimentary system and doesn't come to the system, then it is not going to have any problem irrespective of the quantum you expose. So if there is a little absorption, then you can do some 90-day study and find out NOEL and compare it with your exposure, whether there is a margin of exposure is more than 300. If it is more than 300, forget about it, it is safe. If it is between 100 and 300, what you could do, maybe as a entrepreneur or developer, you could do some refinement of the exposure, whether you can reduce the dose so that it comes, MOE comes below 300 or above 300. If it is less than 100, irrespective of your refinement, then we cannot accept it. Okay? If it is below 300 and there is a sufficient absorption, then you go to tier 3. In tier 3, you could do many other tests, toxicological states, and also you derive one acceptable daily intake, and if it is acceptable daily intake exceeds, then we will not allow. So this is the 3. But what happens to the consumers? Consumers sometimes are confused because of the conflicting scientific information. Some paper says this is good, some scientific paper says it is carcinogenic. Consumer is confused, consumer is not a scientist. What is our duty as a entrepreneur? There is a fear in the consumer's mind, so we must see that this fear is converted to the confidence, then only our business can grow. How it can be done? It is 3E: expectation, experience and experiment. Expectation of the consumer, expectation of the regulators. Experience, we have the experience of the business, we have the experience of science, and we can probably do much more experiment and we can achieve those things. What are the challenges in India? It is a vast country. It cannot be compared with some small countries. We have a huge population of 1.42 billion. It was on only 3 days back. No systematic recent food consumption data. Need to have template for submission of data and information. Need to have guidelines for risk assessment of flavors in food. How we can mitigate those challenges? Through 3C: communication, coordination and collaboration between consumers, industry, exporter and government. What do we want? Of course, we need constant discussion and the existing FSSAI regulation, rule 3.3.1, negative list, limitations, all these things we need to discuss. The global list of flavoring which approved from Femangras, US FDA, Codex JECFA, EU need to be discussed. The Codex guidelines for the use of flavoring, CSC, all these things we have to do. Thank you very much and thanks for giving me a patient hearing. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Kunungo.
So, good morning, everybody. First of all, I would like to thank FAFAI for inviting us today to attend this panel discussion. We feel very honored. It's the first time actually that IOFI is allowed to attend this type of panel discussions, and we're really looking forward to have a dialogue on the 3 C's you just mentioned. A special thanks goes to the FAFAI president, Mr. Rishabh Kothari, and also to Jimon Kora, who cannot be here today. for all the organization over the last weeks and months. I will be very brief today because I would like to have the opportunity to discuss during the panel session. I just wanted to briefly introduce FAFAI. This is our mission statement, and as you can see, our mission is mainly about ensuring the safety of our flavorings. We also want to make sure that the flavorings are responsibly produced, obeying GMP and best practices which are shared amongst our members. And finally, it's also about protecting and respecting the environment. Sustainability has become a business imperative over the last few years, and I think we all together should work together to protect our planet with its limited resources. And finally, it's about the consumers, and I think this was nicely explained during the other panel. The consumers expect quite a lot these days. First of all, taste. They want to have their favorite taste in the supermarket and the shelves, but at the same time they also want healthy diets. Sugar reduction, salt reduction, this has been mentioned before. And I think our industry, the flavor industry, has the innovation capacity to provide solutions to help the consumers to make these healthy choices. Just a few facts and figures. FAFAI has been established back in 1969. We are an association, an umbrella association, I should say, representing 17 national and regional associations around the globe, and also 11 so-called ordinary company members. All in all, IOFI membership represents 85, maybe even 90% of the global flavor market. We have a 5.2 million euro annual budget, and 60%, 60, of this budget is injected into our global science program. And finally, we are observers at Codex Alimentarius, so we are attending the meetings and providing input to the member delegations, allowing for the adoption of guidelines which are the basis for national legislations around the globe. This gives you just an overview of our geographic representation, and as you can see, in Asia Pacific we have a lot of national member associations in Korea, Japan, Indonesia, Australia, New Zealand. Most recently, the Thai Flavor Association joined FAFAI, and also the Chinese colleagues from CAFCI. And in Latin America and North America, you also see our national association members, and not to forget EFA in Europe. And maybe let me also stress something here. Mr. Rao, you mentioned that in India, most of the flavor companies are small and medium or even micro companies. The same is true in other parts of the world. When you look at all these national associations, they represent small and medium and micro companies. Just to give you one example, EFA, for example, is representing approximately 320 small and medium enterprises in Europe, and the same is true for FEMA in the US or JEFMA in Japan. And let me also stress that in our organizational structure, when you look at the IOFI board, we have 12 board members. 6 board members are representing the ordinary company representatives, so here on the right side of this slide, and the 6 other representatives on the board are delegates from the national associations. So we want to make sure that the small and medium enterprises are also heard through their board delegates. This is just a very brief overview of our main strategic objectives, and it is first and foremost about science and safety. Remember the 60% of our budget injected into the science program. And what are we actually doing? Well, we are working both in a reactive and in a proactive way. Reactive means we are satisfying the expectations of risk assessment bodies around the globe. Over the last 10, 15 years, EFSA in Europe, through the evaluation program, kept us very busy. So we have generated data for 400 flavor ingredients over the last 15 years in order to meet the expectations of the European risk assessors, and we were rather successful. And proactively means that we are also enhancing our data sets on a regular basis. And we are also looking for alternatives to animal testing. As you know, the flavor safety evaluations require animal testing if you want to do the tox and gene tox testing. But I think we all together should also work on alternatives to animal testing, and this is what IOFI stands for. The second pillar of our organization is about regulatory harmonization. You mentioned the Codex guidelines. I already indicated that the Codex guidelines form the basis for national legislations around the globe. And let's not forget, all the companies present here today, big ones, small ones, they want to trade with each other, right? So it works in both directions. When you harmonize with Codex Alimentarius, or when you harmonize with flavor safety approaches in other parts of the world, this reduces tariff and non-tariff barriers, and I think this is also very important in order to ensure a viable and a sustainable prosperity for our industry. I already mentioned sustainability. Together with our colleagues from the Fragrance Association, we established the IOFI Sustainability Charter. And I think this is also a very important initiative from the industry because we want to raise the sustainability profile of our industry. We can do a lot. Think of global gas emissions, carbon footprint, water management, waste reduction, circular economy. All these things are already on the political agenda, and our industry is proactive and provides the tools and the best practices for our members to improve their sustainability profile. And finally, and this goes back to your presentation, Dr. Kanungo, it's also about communication. The consumers want to know what's in their food. They have no clue what food ingredients are. They are mixing up additives and flavorings. They are also ignoring what actually a molecule is and what a molecule does in their body. There is chemophobia out there. So I think we have together, industry, regulators and policymakers to work together in educating people in order to build trust. So I'm fully with you on this point. And let me also just highlight a few of publicly available resources. To start with the Global Reference List, the GRL. This is a compendium of all the existing flavor safety evaluations issued by the main risk assessment bodies, be it the FEMA expert panel, be it JECFA or EFSA. So you can go on our web page, there is a search tool, and then you can type in either a CAS number or the name of a flavor ingredient, and you will see the flavor evaluation status for the given substance. Then we also make available the Code of Practice. The Code of Practice is based on the Codex guidelines for the use of flavoring substances. And here you will find GMP best practices helping our members, but also other stakeholders. It's publicly available to produce flavors in a safe and responsible way. And finally, the Sustainability Charter, which I already mentioned. This is something you can find on a dedicated web page by typing IOFI Sustainability Charter. Yeah, and finally, before starting our panel discussion, I just wanted to emphasize again that IOFI, being an umbrella organization representing associations, we apply the principle of subsidiarity, meaning local issues, local regulatory questions should be dealt by locals in the first place. This means FAFAI is the natural partner of the Indian authorities when you are discussing negative list versus positive list or any changes you would like to implement in the flavor regulation. IOFI is not stepping in proactively. We are just offering our support to FAFAI, helping them to engage in a productive dialogue with the authorities. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Sven. Now we'll start the group discussion. Dr. Kunungo, I have a few questions for you. Firstly, as we all know, we have a negative list, and the industry is very happy with the negative list for over the years. Now, why should we go for any other list, whatever you call it, whether reference list or any other list, what you call it? Why should we, what is the disadvantages of negative list, and why should we shift to any other list?
It's a very good question, and also very difficult to answer. If there is a negative list, this is my personal opinion, the negative list based on the scientific information as exists on today. So if you are saying product A is a negative in character, tomorrow some science may develop and interpretation may develop, that becomes a positive list. So if you have a positive list, then the industry people, they need not be worried. If their product figures in the positive list, that means its safety, its exposure have already been evaluated, so they can go ahead. This is the reason, in my personal view, is there should be a list which is positive. That means it passed everything, all regulatory criteria.
But the concern is, doctor, there is a new molecule is invented, okay, and they have done the scientific studies, but in India it takes some time to get the product approved. So then we are at a disadvantage.
Okay, to answer this, as you have shown in this, if some particular product you want to bring to India, you must do some pre-marketing study and have some exposure assessment. Your safety assessment have already been done by other countries. You need not invent the wheel. What you do, you give the information, give the exposure things, and there are the tools like SAR, OECD, QSAR. You find out that if that is below that, then that particular product can come to the positive list. So there is no problem. And you are saying that it will take some time. Yes, there is for everything there is some gestational period.
Okay.
If I just may add something on this negative list versus positive list. I think when you look at the landscape globally, most of the countries, I think approximately 55 countries, apply a positive list, right? Most of them are using the by reference approach because they don't have the expertise or the resources to establish their own risk assessment program. So they rely on the good work already done by other risk assessment bodies. And this is where, for example, GRL comes in because we are showing the overview of all these evaluations, right? There are just a few countries, including India for the time being, with a negative list. I think it's only 3 countries as far as I know. And then there are some countries that are somehow in between, like for example Korea. They rely a sort of a by reference approach, but they reserve the right to sometimes look into the dossiers and to ask additional questions. So this is, I think, the general trend is going towards a positive list by reference approach. And when you think of the establishment of the European positive list back in 2012, and you see the press releases of the EU Commission, the main reason back then for the EU to establish a positive list was the consumer. Because the consumer feels much more comfortable when he sees something in writing, black and white. It's about trust.
Thank you, Sven. Dr. Kunungo, you have mentioned about tire approach. Can you please elaborate on that, the tire approach?
Okay. You see, there could be 2 guidelines or decision-making guidelines. One guideline is, you say 1 to 30, these are my requirements. You give all the informations, whether it is required or not required. Either you call it a, the tire approach, or you call it a decision tree. If this is there, you accept. If this is not there, go to this next step. If next step is not compatible, go to next step. So this is very good both from the industry point of view as a regulator point of view. They are not going to have, as I have given you this, if the exposure assessment, from the exposure assessment, everything under Kramer class, from first is structure activity relationship, genotoxic, not genotoxic. If it is not genotoxic, you need not go for, ask them to again generate genotoxicity data. So the tire system or decision tree system, whatever they are saying, tire system, we may, in India, we may call it a decision tree system, whatever the system may be, it helps both the industry as well as the regulators to come to a conclusion.
Okay. Sven, doctor talked about genotoxicity. Okay, you have something to say about it?
Yeah, I saw this slide on the substance which showed genotoxic results. Don't ask me to quote the substance again. In our jargon, we call it beef thiophene. And this substance was subject to the EU evaluation program back in 2009, 2010. And being part of this evaluation program, IOFI looked into the material and generated data, and then we realized that it showed genotoxic results. And even before the EU Commission, the risk manager, took any measures, IOFI already alerted its membership through our own communication channels, and we asked our members to no longer use this material, right? So just wanted to say that sometimes it's better to not to wait for the risk manager, but to step in proactively, act as a responsible industry, and to ask for reformulations. That's what we did in this specific case. And maybe also to note that the FEMA expert panel already also withdraw the material from the FEMA lists before, so they also stepped in at a very early stage.
Thank you, Sven. Doctor, I've seen a slide there regarding infant formula. Why exposure assessment for the infant formula, which is not there as of now? We are not adding any flavors to the infant formulas.
As on today, if you need to have the exposure assessment there is no need for any infants up to 16 weeks of age, because under Indian condition, we only advocate the breastfeeding up to 16, no additional food. But there are certain situations in which the infant formula need to be given. If somebody is, the mother after delivery expires, the children has to be given some artificial food. So in those artificial food, in case any industry tomorrow wants to add some flavor to it, then need to be given depending on the dose, how much it is to be given, how much you have added in that formulation. So the exposure assessment, if it is there, then it will be easier for the regulators to give the regulatory approval very quickly.
Okay. Yes, thank you. Sven, when the doctor was speaking about the poundage survey, okay, one of his slides said that FAIM model and SPET tech. So what is your IOFI have anything as such?
Yeah, the FAME model is pretty high on our list, to-do list these days, because as Dr. Kanungo showed, the EU Commission is now intending to use this FAME tool to measure exposure to consumers. However, and I'm not an expert in intake and certainly not an expert in the FAME tool, but I understand from our expert that this tool is not adequate to our specific needs as the flavoring industry with our low use levels. What it means actually is that if you feed our use level into the FAME model, it might lead to overestimations of exposure. And this is certainly not in our interest and also not in the interest of the regulators, because they want to have accurate information in order to take necessary steps if needed at all. So we are working at IOFI with our intake task force to offer some alternatives to the FAME model, and we are hoping that the EU Commission will accept some correction factors in order to avoid overestimations. And you mentioned our global poundage survey. This is certainly also a very good tool for our industry, but also for regulators, because it gives you a first indication of exposure. The poundage survey is an exercise we are running at IOFI every 5 years through our national associations covering the main regions in the world. And this year's poundage survey covered for the first time also China and Indonesia. So we're talking about roughly 1.5 billion consumers, right? And we collected the poundage, so the tonnage bands of materials in use. And this, of course, is, oh, this mosquito is hunting me, sorry. This poundage survey is a starting point, giving you already a rough order of magnitude of exposure. But of course, this requires then further work, because we need then to go through all the food categories, all the applications, and to come up with the refined use levels. But here again, this is something in Europe where we are working closely together with the EU Commission. They reached out to our member association EFA, and we are having regular meetings with them to produce the best and the most accurate data together.
Thank you, Sven.
I just want to add. Sven, I have a suggestion. Whether it is Sven model or FIM template, whatever it may be, I request the Indian Association, FAFAI, can they, to start with, may consider few experts, regulator, there are many regulatory people in the industry itself. They can think it and start a pilot study, and under Indian condition. Then we can think where it is implementable, where it is not implementable. Accordingly, we can make certain amendments as and when required. Do you agree with it?
Yes, sir. That is already, we also are thinking in those lines.
Yes.
To associate with some universities, academia, and some industry members to create some kind of a template for this and do a survey for this.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I cannot speak for FAFAI, of course, but if FAFAI would decide to do such a first poundage survey internally, we are happy to provide support because we have the methodology and the knowledge, and we could share this methodology with FAFAI if they want to do the exercise.
We'll certainly look at it.
Good.
Finally, I know many of our industry members were concerned about the IFRA and IYFI. Sven, can you tell me please what is the difference between IFRA and IYFI?
Well, this is a delicate question because it's our sister organization, right? So I think we share a lot of things in common, but there are also a few significant differences. And I think the most significant difference is that IOFI is operating in a completely different regulatory environment. We are subject to risk and flavor safety evaluations driven by authorities like EFSA or JACFA, and we are feeding into a system, whereas IFRA has the IFRA standards. It's a different regulatory framework. This being said, it's currently changing with all the new initiatives under the EU Green Deal and the CSS strategy, where you can also see a shift in a new direction for the fragrance colleagues. And the other difference I would like to highlight, and I made it actually clear in my landscape, we have these organizational setup that in our board you have regional representatives. I think IFRA has the same, but we also then have financial flows. So meaning the small and medium enterprises affiliated to a national association, for example, in the US, FEMA, or in Japan, they are also contributing to the IOFI budget. So when you look our global budget, the 5.2 million I showed, then 55% of the budget comes from the company members, and the remaining 45 comes from the associations and the SMEs behind. So this means that they are really fully involved in the decision-making processes through their representatives, and they are also providing financial contributions.
Thank you, Sven. Now can we go to the open house? Yes. Gentlemen, we'll have questions from the audience.
Yeah. Dr. Kanungo. Yeah. May I ask the question?
Yes, Thank you. I have a couple of questions. My name is Uday Naik and I am representing Aromax, and we are manufacturer of flavors.
Because there is some problem.
So actually issues regarding flavors are just like elephant in the room. Everyone knows the issues, but no one wants to discuss because these issues are very complex. Particularly these are the problems for MSME flavor manufacturers. The first issue is regarding the definition of naturals. Nowadays, most of the European countries, American countries are manufacturing natural vanillin. They are they are manufacturing natural manufacturing for the food industries, because as per the European definition and as per the US definition, the products manufactured by bioprocess technology using natural raw materials are natural vanillin. But as per Indian FSSAI definition, only the products extracted by physical extraction process and not by microbial and not by bioprocess, these are not considered as natural. So the vanillin, which is manufactured from ferulic Ferulic acid is again derived from the natural raw material. So that vanillin, which is nowadays very widely available in market as a natural vanillin, and so the flavors made from these vanillins. So flavor made from these vanillins are claimed as natural as per the European and US regulation, but not as per the FSSAI regulation. So I will continue my question again. So it's a question for sir as well.
Please.
Uh, I think whatever your questions, since it is being discussed in this forum of a conference, I'll advise you, you can make it as a recommendation of this conference and can send to FSSAI for further consideration with all facts and figures if you give. Okay?
Okay, sure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, yeah, thank you. Yes.
Yeah. I would like to limit my questions or queries or doubts towards regulation. Indian regulation as well as international regulation. I am a flavor house in India, a family-oriented flavor house, and I am also a student of Codex since 1978. Now, whatever I was hearing here, it's just, I'm basically confused. Are we talking about safety of food for the consumer or safety of a flavor for the consumer? My flavor is never consumed directly by any consumer. It is not for direct human consumption at all. My flavor is not a nutrition product at all. If somebody is not labeling that way, it is your problem. So therefore, my concern is I should be very safe when I am added to any food. That is the objective of my safety. Now, when we are talking about flavorings here, we are talking about compounding of flavorings. There are 550 INS numbered dangerous, hazardous ingredients or additives that are added to food which are consumed at 21 gram per month by a human being, leading to tumors. I am not part of that INS number additives. My flavorings are outside this, number one. Number two, let us not forget India is committed to WTO. We are not committed to EU. We are not committed to IOF. We are committed to WTO. And WTO has got a wing which is called Codex. And Codex in 1978 did two things. One was to consolidate the different methodologies of testing, which were conflicting with each other. They made one single methodology of testing, and presently there are 2090 ingredients, chemicals that we are using, whose monographs are available on Google. We are referring to that one. As far as two people were mentioning, positive list, reference list. Yes, reference list is the way ahead. Negative list was born in 1955. And positive list was also born in 1955. JECFA reference list is continuing to develop and grow since 1978. In 2023, we should follow JECFA. Whoever wants to make a recommendation, let that recommendation reach JECFA, and as a country, we come here and implement that one. FAFAI has got a Codex wing also. I don't know how active that internal Indian Codex wing is in, as my friend IOF representative is saying, they are the observers there. Are we observers or we are contributors in JECFA or Codex is the question. My friend also mentioned very rightly, and we have been hearing about it and forgetting, about some statement, not a policy, but a statement of 2008, Codex statement on flavorings. It is a statement, it's not a guideline. We need to develop beyond that one. Now, when I say I'm confused. The regulation which you are talking and the methodology of testing, etc., makes meaning when I'm making oleoresins. My soil in India is arsenic generating soil. How do I remove that arsenic and then go ahead with making food or flavor in the form of oleoresin, which is consumed? My lung is damaged, my kidneys are damaged, I'm diabetic population, and this is only because of the arsenic content of various foods, including basmati rice or sugarcane juice or products that are consuming more groundwater. There are methodologies to remove or reduce at tolerable levels. But then that have to be adopted to my flavoring industry in the form of whatever naturals are grown. They need to be tutored how to first eliminate all the pesticides as well as the arsenics and other things which are naturally growing or added in the form of pesticides also, and then come up. As far as international products are concerned, whatever we are importing here is stamped as safe because there is a test which FAFAI is doing and then releasing that material to me. So therefore, my safety of my material which is going into food and that food is going into the consumer is protected. There are thresholds of everything in the monograph if people have seen, and FAFAI has got all this literature which people may not have seen, but there are one or two people who have referred to that one, you know, and that is the thing which we are referring and going ahead. So therefore, there is a confusion whether safety of food or whether safety of flavors in the food. That is the question.
Yeah. Sven?
I have to admit it was very difficult to hear, but I think I know Ravi Mehra's position since a couple of years. The only thing I would maybe say is food ingredients like flavorings or additives or enzymes are subject to safety evaluations since many, many years, right? And I think this is a prerequisite for food and beverage manufacturers because they need to know that the ingredients they use are safe. The second comment I have, because I'm not 100% sure I understood what Ravi Mehra said, but IOFI's role at Codex Alimentarius level is twofold. On the one hand side, we are a stakeholder, an industry stakeholder like many, many others, and we are attending meetings, listening, and whenever there is a topic which is of relevance for us or for the food and beverage manufacturers, then we would step in and provide our comments. And I think this is common practice everywhere in the world. And the second role we are playing is when it comes to the JECFA evaluation program. Here, IOFI is submitting dossiers and data following the call for data issued by the JECFA Secretariat, which is on a yearly basis. And then we provide dossiers for review at JECFA level, which I think is a good thing because JECFA is globally accepted and we have an interest in making sure that all the materials in use get a JECFA approval.
Thank you, Sven. Anybody else?
Hi, good afternoon. Am I audible? Yeah. Can you hear me? Okay. Shahzad Khan from Crescent Dharma. I have a query to FSI doctor. We have been importing flavors and one of the shipment got stuck in the custom because they have two HSN codes, chapter 21 and chapter 33, and there's ambiguity about the HSN code. So my query is that how do we address that? And also for the fact that they talk about glycol, being a part of alcohol. And obviously, when you know that between the chapter 21 and chapter 33, we have different duty structures. So my question, I will repeat again. How do we have a clarity about HSN codes between chapter 21 and chapter 33? Maybe I'll have to meet to you, doctor, later on.
No, I'm sorry. This is out of my purview because I am a risk assessment specialist. I cannot answer.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Yes, Ravi sir. Yeah. Ravi sir, 1 second. 1 second.
See, that is 21 is a mixture of colors and other things, soft drink concentrates. And 33 is a mixture of odoriferous substances of a kind that are used in finally into food and beverages. So it's a clarity. If there is no color and other things added, 21 does not apply. So your problem is with your person clearing agent.
Raviji, we also face that. And that problem with, how custom interpret basically. What you say, that is clarification we are giving, but they not agreed. We have faced a similar problem. Okay. Thanks, Dr. Kanago, for your presentation, informative, which is on the risk assessment, which approach. We have to go on that. My question is more on that risk assessment or what you said in your presentation, that it's okay that existing whatever molecules we have with existing references, we go on the positive list, and whatever, top up that coming as a new, we have to go for free approval. But having said with food, we already applied this mechanism of product approval, and industry has gone a lot of pain through that process, because that process was not, fixed timeline. Even, any manufacturer applied for any one product approval, it took us them for 2 years, If that the same mechanism, if you are saying for the flavor, then I'm not sure, how this would be effective this time. So that is my question. So what is your approach, those new molecules, other than the currently, which is not approved by all these references? And if we are going for, approval process, then the mechanism required to do the safety evaluation and all that, FSSAI has infrastructure in place or not?
Thank you. This is a very good question. In fact, whatever I have made presentation, if we really do the exposure assessment, adopt this decision tree method or tier method, whatever it may be, decision taking time will be reduced like anything. See, FSSAI is how many years old? It is in 2011, the regulations were there. It is 12 years going. It's learning. And with your support, industry support, science support, JECFA support, they are learning and they are trying to implement it basically from the India-centric one. Whatever your time is taken, for everything there is a gestational period. It will take some time. Even if any method you do, over the counter it will be difficult. At least putting some button also needs some time. So whatever is coming today, it will reduce if you have a system in place. System in the sense, whatever we have told. And you must also know those systems. You educate the, give to the information to the FSSAI, saying that this is my exposure, this is below TTC level, this is the QSAR saying that it is not genotoxic, so there is no need, you give next day. It is not next day. It has to wait for the panel, it has to go to scientific committee, it will go to authority, then notification. Okay? Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. I think the time is up. We will close the session. Thank you very much for Dr. Konungo. Now, I think with this, your speech and your coining of 3 E's and 3 C's, the industry's heartbeat would have been slightly slowed down. and you are very receptive, and thank you very much for that. Thank you, Sven, for giving your update. Thanks everybody for joining us for this session.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much, sir. I request all three of you to please be there on the stage as we move forward with the felicitation. I would like to call upon stage Mr. Sanjay Harlalka to felicitate Dr. Debaprata Kanungo.
I will also would like to thank the stalwarts and senior scientists of FSSAI for gracing this occasion. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you so much, sir. And now I would like to call upon stage Mr. Krish Hirani to felicitate Sven Bolschmidt. Thank you so much, sir. And now I would like to call upon stage Mr. Atul Anand to felicitate our moderator and speaker, Mr. A. Apparao. Okay, let's go ahead for a group picture. And ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us for the second session. I can see all of you guys are still super interested, and it has been 2 wonderful sessions. It's time that we go ahead with the lunch after this. The lunch for the delegates is in Pavilion B, just at the left-hand side of the stage. So all the delegates can have their lunch at Pavilion B. Plus a very special announcement for all the delegates. We have Kolkata delicacies, Kolkata's special foods just outside. So if you want to try out our Kolkata delicacy, it is there till the evening. You guys can go and try it whenever you want.